anymore. So, if you have trouble hearing me, just tell me, and I will try to speak louder. So today we're going to be talking about trademark law. So it's a bit of a shift from what we have been seeing for the past few weeks. And I suppose there's no better way to start just rather than asking you guys, what are trademarks and what are they useful for? So what are trademarks and why do we get them? That's Jeremy.
I would say these are symbols that represent like a company or a specific brand and associated with that brand.
Symbols which represents a company or a specific brand. So symbols, that's a good starting point, I suppose. Anyone else? Larissa?
They help us distinguish goods from others.
Oh, so it allows us to tell apart goods from others. So distinguishes goods and services. Anyone else? And why do we keep them? Possible reasons why. And of course, there may be some overlap here already. Yes, Jeremy.
I would say because maybe popularity, because that like you're associated with one brand, people are more likely to buy your product.
Okay, so popularity. We can use this as a starting point as well. What is that?
Also for like quality.
Quality. What do you mean by quality here?
I mean, most of the time you just assume that a branded product is better than just like a generic one.
Okay, so also related to popularity
Yeah.
is like advertising, let's say, and things associated therewith. So quality is somewhat connected to these other elements that Jeremy told us about. You, behind Larissa.
Yeah, I mean, one of these functions is recognize the original of the good or service, or originality.
I wouldn't say originality. I would stick with origin. Originality is more of a copyright thing. Some trademarks may be original, but they don't really need to be. So origin, which has much to do with this part, doesn't it? Meaning, we can tell one product from another by looking at its origin. But that also tells us about quality in some way as well, doesn't it? Because if I know where a product comes from, I can have an expectation when it comes to how this product actually works or its quality, how it tastes, for example. So here is one example. We can tell apart Coke from Pepsi by their trademarks. It just has much to do with the first part. So we have symbols. Let's just replace this for signs, all right? Which is going to be telling us something about either the company or the brand, whatever we understand the brand to be, that remains to be discussed. It may be either one or the other, or maybe both. But ultimately allowing us to distinguish goods and services, which also has or may have something to do with popularity. Maybe let's replace this one for reputation. Advertising, quality, or some kind of expectation of quality. And this pretty much tells us a lot about trademarks already. And here we can try to fit this within the main, what we call the main justifications for trademarks. And you guys pretty much told us already most of them. Search costs, that is essentially the idea of marks allowing us to distinguish products and services from one another. So think about Coke and Pepsi, all right? Now let's think of the counterfactual. Let's think of the idea that if we have no trademarks whatsoever, and you had to go to Tesco and you wanted to buy Coke, not Pepsi, how would you do that? Jeremy?
You'd have to read the sign, or you'd have to try it.
You would have possibly to, you would have to taste it. Yeah. Does that sound like a very practical thing to do? Especially because given the kind of product that we're talking about, software, obviously if someone has opened it and tasted it, it becomes useless. Any other way? And it also depends on how you see trademarks or how you define them, obviously. Let's say you would look at the label and try to find out some other information relating to the product, which is not a trademark. Let's say corporate name or ingredients, proposition, that kind of thing. So that's what we say about search costs. Search costs is basically a economic theory justification for trademarks, which means trademarks reduce search costs. It's very literal in that sense, which means consumers are able to find what they want faster and easier because of trademarks. By just seeing whether it is Coke or Pepsi, I know which one I want to buy, and that's because I know how it tastes, or at least I have an expectation when it comes to its taste, which it has much to do with quality aspect to which Larissa was referring. But also, there's the other side as well, which is the protection of goodwill side, which you have also mentioned when it comes to reputation, advertising, and so forth. And here we think goodwill as essentially investment. So it is a means of protecting investment. So that is also a classic justification for intellectual property. So if we think about broadly about the main theories, and here I'm talking about the mainstream justifications for intellectual property, what does this one remind us of? Protection of goodwill. I have put a lot of effort and invested for a long period in something. Hence, yeah.
Patents? Patents, maybe?
Patents, yes, but I was just looking. I was actually looking for the name for label. Let's say labor-based theories here. And if you guys remember, you probably read this at some point. The law can provide, you're entitled to the fruits of your labor and that kind of thing. So it's also what some would say a very strong rationale in trademark law, and also a very utilitarian one, such as the first one, incentives to business expansion. You grant trademarks, you can register a mark before even using it, so you have some kind of legal certainty when it comes to your market planning, your branding strategy, and the investments that you can make, because you know that for a given period you're going to have the possibility of exploiting this particular mark without some kind of disturbance. Just a very brief overview. You guys, we will actually see this more next semester when we are talking about EU trademarks, and then we will go into in more detail when by addressing these differences. But just so you guys have an idea as the backdrop for today, these are the two main institutes that we deal with. EU law, trademarks directive, means national law, being a directive, and seeks to harmonize laws between member states. You guys, most of you probably know this. From EU law itself. The other one is the EU trademark regulation, which being a regulation, what is the difference between a regulation and directive? Does anyone know? Jeremy was quick enough to just raise his hand.
Regulation, the law of the regulation applies in all European states automatically, and directives don't apply directly, they apply indirectly when countries turn it into national laws.
Very good, so it has direct effect, meaning it doesn't require implementation by national law. And this is a system which actually runs in parallel, so they both coexist. difference being essentially that EU trademarks are trademarks which are granted by the European Union Intellectual Property Office, and they have what we call a unitary effect. So they automatically have effect throughout the entire European Union. Whereas obviously trademarks directive being dealing with national law, it's pretty much similar to national patent systems. Meaning if you want to register a national trademark, a UK trademark, that's only going to be valid in the UK, a German trademark in Germany, and so forth. Just so you guys have an idea. There's some of the case law is referring, on the topic of today, most of the case law is actually addressing issues of the trademarks directive, but they are essentially the same, if not by just referring to different kinds of rights, but the provisions are essentially the same. The kind of cause of actions are the same, the defenses are the same. It's just that one is dealing with national law and national registrations, the other is dealing with community or EU law more broadly. But now going back here then, and here we still have our example as Coke. Let me now try to provoke you. So we were talking, and we began talking about defining trademarks as symbols. And then we may have here relevant question as to what is actually, or what can be a trademark here. So if you guys look Coca-Cola as our example, what do you guys would think is the trademark?
The shape of the glass,
okay.
the colors, like red and white.
Yeah.
The color of the liquid, but
Is
Pepsi has the
trademark?
same. Yeah, no, Pepsi has the same
Good.
name. Pepsi has the same color, so no.
But that's a good point. So what makes you distinguish between the color of the liquid and red as a color? So why do you think one may be a trademark and the other may not be a trademark? Because this is the right kind of thinking. So why did you dismiss the color of the liquid?
Because other trademarks use the same liquid with the same color.
Other companies, not necessarily.
Yeah, companies, yeah.
Very good. So it's not what we call distinctive. It's not what is telling you what the origin of the product or the source of the product is. Kenning, it's not Kenning, sorry. Ding, I think.
I think it's the relationship to the product. When you see the Coca-Cola, the trademark of the Coca-Cola, you will remind you the taste of the liquid, taste of the smell of the Coca-Cola. That is the original.
Oh yes, of course, and there is the first is probably Coca-Cola itself drinking of the bottle. Anything to add, Larissa?
I think the word Coca-Cola itself.
Exactly. So this is to say that what we see as a trademark may be more than just what were initially logos, symbols, and words. That was in the very early days of trademark law, and that's why we began with this. This is the typical or the traditional kind of trademarks when we think about words and logos or stylized writing in that kind of art. But we also, because of branding and marketing practices, consumer habits have developed in such a way that, as an empirical matter, they have come to associate particular features of products as well with a given origin. So, as you mentioned, the bottle itself might be telling me that it is still Coca-Cola. So if I just obscure say Coca-Cola, you see the bottle and you can still tell that it is Coca-Cola. So in our example, when we were talking about going to Tesco and trying to tell apart Coke from Pepsi, of course we would have to treat not only Coca-Cola, but also have the same shape of the bottle, and arguably using the same color. So one is not blue and the other one is not red. We're both just the color of the liquid, say, just brown, pinkish kind of thing. Because otherwise, there are other visual cues which would allow you to distinguish one from the other. They may or may not be also functioning as trademarks. Whether these are actually legally protected may be a different story. Not all of them in Europe are actually protected as trademarks. But empirically speaking, consumers do tend to recognize these features as belonging to a particular brand, as being associated with a particular brand. So here is one example. Can you guys tell me what brand is this?
Battery.
Very good. So that is also to say that the kind of use that we make of a trademark may be less obvious to some people because we would normally expect, again, trademarks to be something like a label or a particular word written on it. However, we do have them being used just as the product itself or more embedded within the product, which raises some interesting questions as well, if we think about it, because we were talking about what trademarks are for and why we have them. And one of the interesting aspects that you guys raised was quality. As it is associated with a given image, it tells me something about the product, its quality, and I can expect something from it. And then I can be a return customer every time we buy something like Coke, or maybe if I do like Burberry. But can you guys think of other reasons why someone may want to buy this? Yes.
I think a more important part is the reputation, because some people just want to buy it because it's this brand and people would know it's an expensive brand, for example.
Okay, reputation. Fair enough. And what do you mean by reputation? So let's do some quick brainstorming here. What other words could we use to refer to or try to define reputation? So what does that mean? Because that sounds a little bit too generic, doesn't it? Okay, there is brands and there is reputation.
Actually, you have to build up reputation. For example, let's say there's a new brand coming out and they have to prove that, for example, the fabrics are very good or the taste of the product is very good. So it also is connected to, the reputation is obviously connected to the customer.
Okay, so it's something that is built or constructed. Good. And how does one usually do this? Do this? Yeah.
Advertising.
Advertising. And who are the addressees? To whom am I advertising?
We, like the consumers.
We, yes, we. Maybe not all of us,
Yeah.
but yes, consumers. And let's, for now, just keep these in mind, because we will come back to this. This is a very important point. But still asking here, think about Burberry. Why else I may want to buy this because of the reputation that Burberry has as a brand? Any other reason? Yeah.
Quality.
Quality. Quality. Good. So, how would you elaborate on this? In what sense, quality?
Well, I mean, the main thing with luxury brands is they have sort of a consistency, and you know you're buying good fabric. It's really expensive, so people are looking for top quality things. Usually go with top quality designers.
Arguably, yes.
Arguably, yeah.
So there is this may have something to do with this. One would say, but most people would believe or at least expect that they are of a higher quality, even though they may not always be proportionate to how much they cost. I think some of us would agree. Yes.
I mean, some brands represent a certain type of people, so you want to show off your character somehow with like wearing a specific brand.
Good. Okay. So thinking about the addressees here, and then people of a special kind, so the addressees, and let's work with this. So, what do you guys think of Burberry? And you can be very honest about it. I think that's the point. So think about attributes or adjectives that you could use to refer to Burberry. Brainstorming, really. Celine.
I think are very posh people.
Mm-hmm. So we are now here, okay, where we what has been built, or at least what the address is. Let's assume for the sake of the argument that being us would say, so posh. Yeah?
Rich.
Kind of like the same, but yeah. Anyone else? Jerry?
Exclusive.
Exclusive. So, accessible to the few. Some would say sumptuary. Anything else? Yes.
Design style about this.
Design, okay,
Yeah.
style is stylish. I like its design, fair enough. Which may or may not be the same as posh, probably not, depending on how you see it. Anything else? Okay, so thinking in terms of what trademarks may convey, so we are seeing here now that it already tells us, or may tell us more than just the origin. It tells us Burberry, but Burberry itself as a brand may have or may not have, depending on who's thinking about it, a lot of weight, and may give you a lot more information than just it is Burberry. So it may be posh, it may be of a higher quality. It's probably expensive, probably too expensive, or some would say. Posh, rich, sometimes exclusive, and all that, and then everything that comes with it. There's one last point that I would really like to make when it comes to these, actually to the pants themselves. Why else would someone like to buy this thing? Yeah.
They want to get the connotations from the brand manufacturer themselves.
Okay, as a statement,
Yeah.
ish, or as a means of expression. That's a good point, and I like this point. Yeah.
As a fashion trend?
As a fashion brand, pretty much
Fashion
connected.
trend.
Huh?
As a fashion trend.
As a fashion trend, okay. Because everyone is buying, I want to do the same.
Yeah, like when
Fair
the
enough.
Gucci trainers came out and everybody bought them.
Maybe the obverse of expression or statement, but fair point. That is actually true. Can I just want to buy these because they look cool? Or because I think they look nice?
Can you repeat the
Sorry.
question?
Can I just buy them just because I think they look nice?
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. So does it depend on it being Burberry or something else? Or it depends on how it is designed and how it looks?
Unfortunately, usually it's because it's Burberry.
Why do you say that?
Because people tend to go, you can buy that pattern off many of the places. It's
Ah.
a unique pattern, but people will go for Burberry because they want to be associated with the brand in some way.
Ah, very good. So there must have something to do with what we understand to be brand image and advertising and everything that we have been talking about. But there is the trademark law question. Just before you.
Yeah, it just means the lighties and the stripe is very distinctive for this style. So someone want to buy this design, just want to be distinctive, because it's very, the stripe and the lighties.
Yeah. But going back again, so this is pretty much the empirical point. You're pretty much right in saying, yeah, people don't really want to buy the lookalike. Let's use this more polite term to define the other products which may look similar or exactly the same. But the legally relevant trademark law question would be, is Burberry the only one allowed to do this? And what do you need to know in order to answer this? Yes, Jeremy.
Like Burberry has like a licensing rights that controls like design, design.
A license, but yes, if you're thinking in terms of copyright, you're absolutely right. But let's forget about copyright, because this can be a copyright work.
Let's say they have a trademark for the pattern of the fabric, but even if I could just take one red line and say this is a new pattern now, but it will still look the same from like far away. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
and you're getting more specific, which is where I'm hoping to get to within the next few slides. And you're right, it depends on the infringement test, but the question here is essentially, is this a trademark or not? Meaning, can this be registered as a trademark or not? Because if it is, a trademark gives exclusive rights in relation to a specific product or service, which means that if this pattern here is registered as a trademark for, say, clothing, that would mean that theoretically, and let's see how that works in practice, Burberry would have exclusive rights in the use of this pattern when it comes to any and all kinds of clothing. So the implications here are, some would say, yeah, they may as well be entitled to it because of all these reasons that we have talked about here. First, they associate this with Burberry, so it does perform a function of origin, let's see this term. There's a lot of investment put into this, which may or may not be protected, or which we may think deserves protection or not. But there's also the other side, which is you're actually removing choices, which means obviously because it is an exclusive right, others will not or may not be allowed to do the same. And we also have many different motivations when it comes to why people actually buy or want to buy this product. One of them being purely aesthetic, meaning because I like the way it looks. So this is pretty much a conflict that we see when it comes to these kind of trademarks that we call non-traditional marks, which are marks that go beyond the typical definition of marks as being words, labels, and logos. So shapes, colors, even sounds are what we call non-traditional marks. But they also raise more competitive concerns that other marks don't. Because say, if I don't want it, you have pretty much an option of picking another mark other than say Apple, if you want to use something in connection with electronic devices. Yes?
I actually don't know if this is a trademark, but I'd say that some well-known brands don't even need this registered trademark because of their reputation. I mean, for example, let's say I buy a fake scarf from Burberry, like a dupe, like a lookalike. People will first think it's Burberry, but if they come and ask me, is this Burberry, and I say no, actually, it's like they don't have to compete with anyone because it already has this reputation. So do they need to register the trademark when they have the reputation anyways?
I do like your point because it is addressing the more empirical / norm setting side of it. And let's talk about this. But first, let's just ask you one question, which might be more of a provocation. If they didn't need that, why do we have so many cases being litigated in courts? That may be one answer. But I do like your point because you're saying there is also, when it comes to this kind of marks, and it also is related to what some other of you have talked about how it can be used as a means of expression, how you can have it as a trend, or even sometimes build tribes being built around it. And think about Harley Davidson, and what does it convey to you as a brand, and what would you expect, be that biased or not, but what would you normally expect from a Harley Davidson user? At least that person must like motorcycles. One would expect. Not necessarily, but these are the assumptions that we have. And one would say that yes, using something that would be a lookalike, not necessarily a fake, because a fake has a very different connotation. But yeah, or sometimes a lookalike would already be enough for someone within a very specific community to be reproached. And that already may work as some kind of norm, which regardless of how law regulates it, may be setting some specific kinds of behavior. Let's say our motor club guy appears with a fake Harley Davidson jacket. That probably is not going to end up well with his fake. So yeah, that's a very, very valid point. But on the other hand, something tells me that by the number of cases that we have being litigated, that they do need it, or at least they would like to have it. Need is actually a very interesting word for someone to use. Do they actually need it? Someone can make a very strong case for saying maybe not. But do they want them? Yeah. So another example here, a postman, similar kind of thing. It is a pattern, different, though not quite, also luxury brand. Maybe different audience because this is more not necessarily, but tends to target more men than Burberry, which tends to target, not necessarily, but tends to target more women. But same kind of logic, and then by just seeing the arrangement of colors, someone who is familiar with the mark, which is a different point, may come to associate that with the brand. So before we move on, so let's just think about let's just make the last point here. Someone seeing this particular sign and associates it with an origin, right? Let's go back to Burberry. So what is the potential effect as well of some other company using this pattern on, say, eyeglasses? Let's say they're not Burberry, they're some other brand. Yes?
I mean, they use their reputation as well, so maybe people tend to buy their products because they think maybe it's related to each other.
Very good point. So they may be relying on Burberry's reputation, which is a point. But even before that, what is the most basic point that it can make? If my decision making as a consumer is driven by what I see as being a visual cue that that product belongs or is associated with a given mark, what is likely to happen when I see the same visual feature? Let's say I'm going to Tesco and I'm in a hurry. I want to buy my soft drink, my cola, and I go for red. Yeah.
And for competition.
And why is that?
Because they actually have the trademark, and when people use the same color or the same sign, the consumers might get confused.
Yes, that is the last point. That is the point. Yeah, fair competition is more like in a factor derivation of that, but essentially, consumers may get confused. So this is essentially the main point here as well. Because on the one hand, we do give trademarks as a means for reducing search costs, as a means of giving some expectation when it comes to the quality of the product and so forth. But obviously, that is premised on the fact, or based on the premise that consumers will not confuse one product with the other upon the use of this particular sign. Because obviously, there is no point in saying that it is reducing search costs, that I can tell it is Coke. If color is probably not the best example, because in the UK, it's not like there is actually an exclusive variety red for Coke. But let's say, for the sake of the argument, shape. There's none either, but just by relying on the shape, I get the product, and I realize when I get home, because I was in a hurry, that it's not Coke. So, trademark law may not be fulfilling its purpose or its objectives. But Celine is pretty much right in addressing these other aspects, which are essentially the brand-related aspects of trademarks, but in addition to, or maybe regardless or irrespective of there being some confusion, there may be other things happening, which may include someone relying on someone else's brand image. And these are the more empirical, factual aspects of it. So the question that we're trying to address here today as well is, to what extent these are legally protected, these expectations, and to what extent they should be legally protected as well. And this is why our customer today is talking about trademark functions in the plural as well. There's another example, shapes or colors. Cadbury in the UK is very much associated with purple. However, as trademarks are very culturally / market dependent, you guys who are not from the UK, can you tell me which brand is usually associated with purple? Yes?
Milka.
Yeah, Milka. So that is already telling that maybe working the abstract or making too many assumptions may not be the best way. Kit Kat, very popular in Germany, we all know. I don't know to speak German myself, but Linz got half the golden bunny. There's also the bear. Linz is very popular when it comes to trademark law cases. But we can also think about the different kinds of uses that can be made of a trademark. We were talking about the different reasons of what they convey, but people may have a reason for using someone else's trademark, don't they? So what is it? Let's think about some of these. So what is the first one? If you guys have read the reading list, you will probably know. focal. So what is this kind of using? What is this kind of product? It's not the real car, let me tell you. Yes.
It's a toy car.
It's a toy miniature, yes. What does this look to you guys? Yeah. Puma, yes. So why is someone doing this? And why are you laughing? Which is the right reaction, I would say. Yes, Celine.
Because it's very obviously not Puma.
Yes.
But they just changed the trademark in a way that people would still recognize it as Puma,
Yes.
and maybe would tend to buy it, but it's obviously not Puma. It's something else.
It's obviously not Puma, so when we say maybe there's no confusion here, but they're obviously using if not referring to Puma. And why are they doing that, and why are we laughing?
Because the plant is upside down.
And it's coma. Yes. And what is that essentially? Yeah.
Be doing that so they won't get like in trouble or like go out before court.
Trying to avoid infringement, yes, but even before that, yes.
I think it seems to be comedy or parody.
Yes, a parody. Because sometimes I just want to make fun of it. And yes, depends on the kind of use, which is telling us as well that trademark law is or probably should be context specific. Because let's think about the kinds of different contexts where someone may use this and whether we think it would be something more or less likely to infringe. So in what context can I do or use a parody? Comedy is the backdrop here. Put it on a t-shirt and sell it, right? But can I just maybe blog it because I'm just making fun and I found it funny and then I wrote a post and put that in my post, yes.
It's kind of secured by free speech probably, because if a Nestle, the best example probably, if you make fun of Nestle, because Nestle deserved it, but I mean like, if you make fun of Nestle, it's kind of free speech, because...
Very good, so free speech. So we were talking about competitive concerns, especially when we thought about reasons why someone may get this kind of facts. But we may have other different kinds of concerns as well, which may be freedom of expression, because this is comedy, I'm trying to do something fun, and obviously we do have different kinds of uses and different kinds of protection to freedom of expression. So one would say, if I'm selling t-shirts for profit with this, it's one thing. If I'm putting this in a blog post, it's another thing. If I'm doing this to make a more political or slash critique, a political statement or critique, that may be actually a very different thing as well. Nestle was one example, there are quite a few. Walmart is another. Yeah.
I'm thinking of, I don't know if you know this brand, Comme des Garçons.
No, not really.
It was like all of the t-shirts, and then another, like something else came out as Comme des Filles. So it was actually just the opposite, but the actual brand was Comme des Garçons. But I mean, the people just bought the other one because it was a parody of this one, which was also recognized as free speech, I guess.
I guess it's a good answer. I guess, maybe. But let's take this example. I do like this example of parodies. And let's take this for the second part after we just review a little bit more of the functions of what very much of those. But let's say parody. First one, the toy replica, let's say merchandising, which also has to do with the Arsenal example. What about the other two? On the right-hand side. So, what is Google AdWords and what? Sorry, I didn't see that. Larissa.
I wanted to talk about the bottom one, the right-hand bottom one. It's comparative advertising.
Oh yes, comparative advertising, very good. So, why would someone do comparative advertising?
To just like state that your product is better than the one that's already on the market.
Okay, very good.
That consumer already rely on.
The very simple answer is to compete. Do we have a problem with that?
Yes.
You do? Why?
Because you put like another brand down just to state that yours is better, even though it might not be.
Okay, so you're not particularly.
And it might like harm the reputation.
Okay, you do have other concerns from this side of the brand owner, or at least the competitor whose mark is being used, yes.
I think this has to be scrutinized for the situation, because there are some cases where it helps the other brands, both of the brands. Because, for example, Burger King and McDonald's, they always compete against each other, and they kind of support each other with that, because everyone is speaking of the other one. So their topic.
At least you raise awareness.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. And who else made comparative advertising benefit?
Consumers.
Why? On the premise that they're.
Because it will bring up the difference, and maybe one is like cheaper.
Exactly. They may increase transparency depending on the kind of advertising that is being made. They present choices or alternatives to consumers. So there may be reasons for us to actually allow or even give incentives to this kind of market practice. But yes, you're right in saying, on the other hand, there may be other things here, such as depending on the kind of message which is being conveyed, that it may harm a brand's reputation. And there.
Oh, you can finish your sentence.
I did. Sorry, I was just my throat is not the best.
Concerning coma, I wanted to say that, for example, parody was not the first thing coming up to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know Wish, the application.
Wish?
Wish.
No.
You can buy dupes from all over the world. Actually, it's mostly coming from China. But for example, we have this brand Amani C. I don't know if you know that one. It's the perfume Amani C. And you would see a dupe on Wish, which is called Arnani P. If I see it, of course, I started laughing. But then it was not because I thought, oh, that's a parody. I was just thinking that maybe this is an alternative.
You were going for the lookalike.
Yeah.
And we do have the archetype of the lookalike case, which we will probably spend more time on today, which is L'Oreal Belleau. Yes, this is the kind. Yeah, there are many reasons why consumers may go for a project, and parody may be a better defense for some than others. Yeah, it may look like funny, but maybe was not the main thing happening there, or maybe shouldn't be the main consideration. Whereas coma, when we say depending on the kind of use they're making, they're just being funny. And lastly, Google AdWords, very similar in a way to comparative advertising, to the extent that, although still controversial, to the extent that you type a keyword on Google and then you see the sponsor links on top, which are usually bid or purchased by competitors who want to announce, to advertise their very own alternatives, let's put it this way, not necessarily is a lookalike even. So today, now we're getting more to the legal aspects, and you guys keep all these in mind, and we'll go back to most, if not all of these points when now addressing the more doctrinal aspects of what we have in European law. So these are the main causes of action for infringement. In order for a trademark to be infringed, and let's assume for today that all these trademarks, even if they are not, let's assume for the sake of the argument that they are trademarks which have been registered, most of them are not or may not be. But we're more concerned here with the last part of the question, which is there an infringement or not? And in order to answer this question, it has to be the act which is being carried out by the defendant has to fit one of these causes of action. And there are three main causes of action which branches out into five. I know that if you're taking trademarks and brands, you probably covered this already. So I can only apologize, but this is just to give the context, because you also find this in the readings. Today, so double identity, likelihood of confusion, and dilution. Dilution, you have three different kinds of harm, or injury probably, which is blurring, harm to the distinctive character, tarnishment, harm to the reputation, and unfair advantage, which is taking an unfair advantage without any kind of compensation. So this is already telling us on its face that some of the concerns that you guys have expressed here may or may not be protected by some of these cause of action, such as blurring, harm to the distinctive character. Even if there is no confusion, there is something which may actually affect this origin function of the mark, which may entitle the trademark owner to some kind of protection. Tarnishment, reputation, such as Larissa's concern with comparative advertising. So even if consumers are not confused, if there is something which may blemish the reputation of a brand, that may be a cause of action under tarnishment. And a fair advantage, many of you were also referring to free riding or leaning on someone else's reputation or relying on someone else's reputation. That would be unfair advantage. But we're not talking about those, even though we are talking about those. Because what I mean by this is that I'm not specifically talking about dilution. Today, we're going to be talking mostly about double identity. But you guys, if you haven't already by your readings, you will soon realize that there is much of this happening here. Because this has much to do, the dilution claims have also much to do with the functions of a trademark, or at least what we expect, or the way that we expect trademarks to function these days. So what does that mean in practice? What is double identity? And this is what you find in the current trademarks directive, the 2015 version. And this might get confusing because European Commission did the most helpful thing that someone can ever do, which is just change the numbering of the articles after people have become used to it for 20 years. Right? Yeah. So what references that you guys find to Articles 5.1 are essentially Article 10.2. No. So most of the writing, including my own writing, is based on Article 5.1, which is pretty much the version of the provision from the prior directive. And I myself keep saying it's 5.1 even though it's not 5.1 anymore. But the point is, when do we have this cause of action? What triggers infringement under what we call double identity? And why it is called double identity? Essentially, it cannot be any easier. The sign is identical, and the goods and products is identical. So someone is taking Coke and using Coke to sell Coke, or to sell soft drinks, or to sell something which is within the same specification or the same definition of the trademark was registered. That's why it's double identity. It's identical signs and identical goods. Now it gets controversial, and the difficulty that you guys see is that in the very first trademark directive, you see this recital here saying that protection afforded by a registered trademark under double identity, meaning whenever there is an identical trademark being used in relation to the same product or service, this protection is actually absolute. And here we go to the same narrative that we have seen in the past years, essentially. Okay, but what does that mean? And what do we do with this? Not surprisingly, it was left for courts, mostly our beloved, although some may not be so fond of, CJU, to tell us what does that mean. Let's take a 5 or 10 minute break before we actually move, and I'm going to start by discussing, come back by discussing Arsenal.
Okay. What are you doing?
And we had this recital pretty much telling us that protection under double identity should be absolute. So, just by the plain meaning of the word, what would absolute normally tell us? Yeah.
There's no reference to anything, so it's like a basic,
Yeah. irrespective of anything else. Essentially, yeah, it's absolute. So you need not consider anything else. If you fall within this, the practical aspect is that if you fall within this, you are automatically infringing. Because that is the point. Absolute protection, one would say that, yeah, okay. If there is double identity, so it is infringing. What would be the problem here if we think about what we were just taught in the first part of our class today? If you think about how trademarks have developed and the different kind of uses that can be made of a trademark or what a trademark can be, do you guys see any difficulty or problem with in conceiving protection under double identity as being absolute, meaning you need not ask any other questions than just find out whether on paper it's the same product and the same mark? Yes, Jeremy.
I would say no, because you might like sell a product like as a retailer or something, and then you still use it, or I think you still would have to like protect the trademark itself.
Come again, sorry?
I think like the question I asked you, I sell a product or something like that, it's still in question because like it's gonna use the trademark.
Okay, you're referring to the question of if it is being used as a trademark or not. So one would say that is already a gloss, because statutory language in here, the direction only tells us that if it is the mark being used or being reproduced in relation to the same products, you are infringing. I mean, if let's think old-fashioned. Let's say someone is using Apple for computer and electronic devices. I think we would all assume there's no issue with us conceiving that well. Someone else is using Apple for computer and electronic devices. We may as well presume that they are infringing, right? What about different kinds of marks? So let's go back to our comma example. It's telling me the point that it is actually the same Puma, but in a different orientation. Yes.
I was thinking about apple and pear, but pear is just something used in sitcoms or shows, you know. So that's why I was confused. Should I mention it? Because it's actually not sold. But
Okay,
they use it in shows, which actually also uses the trademark. Because when I, for example, watch the movie and they have a pear pod or a pear computer, I obviously think of Apple because it's also like it's a fruit, it's bitten, and it's on a computer, which is actually the double identity.
So you do have what we call a mental link between one and the other. But the thing is that let's for the rest of the class, let's just work within double identity. And what you're referring to may be either, depending on the kind of use, likelihood of confusion. If it is such a link, it's strong enough for someone to be thinking that either it is the same product, which is not the case, but at least it is somewhat associated with Apple, meaning it can be licensed by Apple or it can be endorsed by Apple within some way. In any way, it would fall within likelihood of confusion because it would be a conceptually similar mark, say, in relation to identical products, or something like unfair advantage if you think that the link is also strong enough, so to the extent that this particular TV show or movie would be relying on Apple's reputation. In practice, highly unlikely there would be any actionable claim by Apple. It tends to be a higher threshold for this kind of something, very likely. So my question was essentially, comma, if we think that the Puma itself is the same mark, depending on how we define a mark, because yeah, it is a composite mark, there is comma, but one would say, oh, we can say that the mark is actually the Puma, and then if it falls by our narrow definition within double identity, the directive would tell us back in the day that protection would be absolute, meaning you need not ask any other questions, and these would be automatically infringing. What could be the problem here? Yes.
Actually, the argument which Ronnie mentioned with the free speech,
Very good. So you're probably bypassing a lot of questions here, right? Because again, there may be some reason why Puma's mark is being used in this way. And let's move from Puma to our example here of comparative advertising as well, Colgate, which is the competitor's brand. So if double identity is read by the letter, that would mean by just doing comparative advertising this way, because you need to reproduce the competitor's mark, they would be infringing. So what does that mean in practice? Comparative advertising is bad, and this one done in this fashion. That's why we have a stream of a line of cases beginning in Arsenal, which some people like, other people don't, where we see the ECJ coming with this language, essentially saying that the exercise of the exclusive right is reserved to cases in which the use of the sign, depending on how you define the sign of the policy, is liable to affect the functions of the trademark, in particular its origin function. So what was the issue in Arsenal? Yes, there it is.
There was a retailer outside the stadium that sold official products and unofficial products and partially logo sign.
What were the products?
Stickers.
Merchandise. So this kind of thing. And he was outside the stadium selling merchandise which was some were official, meaning some were licensed, others were not. But how did they market these, and for how long was he marketing these?
I don't know how long he did it, but I think he had a distinction between like official products and unofficial products.
Yeah, he clearly labeled saying, oh, this is an official, this is a license section, this is a license section. Yes?
I think it was more than 20 years.
Yes, ballpark number, more than 20 years in counting. So this is something that had been done for about 20 years, give or take, and he was doing this in a way that some would argue that in an empirical, from a very empirical standpoint, consumers would be less likely to be confused because he would warn consumers that this is actually not the license. If you want to buy your license, you can get one of these. These are actually obviously cheaper because they are not licensed. And this raises one very interesting question, which is the implications of finding that whether protection is absolute or not. Because what happens if you say the protection is indeed absolute without any other questions? One would say that thinking about the outcome in Arsenal, the outcome would not be different. But if you think broadly and what the cases that followed, you would have that. There is a big difference here. What was the outcome in Arsenal? Yes?
That the unofficial products were also trademarked.
Yeah, they were infringing. Meaning Reed was Matthew Reed, that wasn't the name of the vendor, who was no longer allowed to sell them. And this is one of the aspects that makes this case controversial, and people tend to focus more on this than on the other things. So yeah, the mixed message that some would say is that while the ACJ was referring that the actual exclusive right of a mark is circumscribed by functions, meaning you can only enforce trademark rights to an extent that there is some kind of harm to the functions that a mark is supposed to perform. They give it a very generous reading and were nudging the National Court to just say that, in this case there is harm to the origin function. The National Court never really asked this question, but again it was found to be infringing, which was controversial, especially because in the UK this kind of use was dealt with passing off, not trademark law, and they tend to be allowed really. So it did affect the market, did change the market overall. But when you read Arsenal and what the ECJ was, some would say, I would say, trying to do here, through the lenses of other noble, then maybe you can see a better, you can see a little bit better the difference between saying there is an absolute protection and there is something which is somewhat limited to functions of a mark being harmed. So what was the issue in Arsenal? Sorry, of Adam Opel? And these are the products. A toy replica, as we talked about it before. Yes.
The toy replicating company used the logo sign and put it like in an instructional.
So the defendant here, Altec, was a company. Was Altec a car manufacturer? No. So they were in the toy industry, really, and they were in the business of manufacturing toy replicas. But there was something very peculiar about the German toy market when it came to replicas. What was it? Yes?
Yeah, for like 100 years.
Since 1890, it was known to be a practice. So it was fairly common, not expected, that products with real life products such as motor vehicles would be made into replicas. And that also meant something else as well, didn't it? So what consumers over these more than 100 years expected of toy replicas? Yes?
To be exactly the same like the car, but in a smaller...
Exactly, so to be as faithful as possible to the real thing. So to the minor detail. And this is not something, this was something that was developed over decades and decades. Sorry. My allergies are catching up. And what was then Opel trying to do here? Yes?
I think Opel tried to say that there was an infringement because actually the trademark was registered for both cars and toys.
Yes. And
the manufacturer of the replicas, he made all these toys, but with Opel's logo.
Mm-hmm.
Trademark.
Yep.
So it would be maybe like the car maybe would not be, the small car maybe would not be like the same, like the car Opel was manufacturing. Am I right?
So let's break it down in a few bits, but you're absolutely right. So first point, Adam Opel was asserting two registrations. One was for motor vehicles, such as the cars that we make. The other one was for toys. Was Opel particularly known for manufacturing toys? No, but they did have the registration. So just a very quick question. What would be the result of it being held that you would be infringing the toy registration for toys? What anyone willing to sell toy replicas would have to do?
Not put Opel as a logo.
Either not put Opel as a logo, or
maybe make a disclaimer that the Opel is not the manufacturer.
Maybe make a disclaimer that in our hypothetical, it would be less likely, but that's a good defense on passing off.
A license?
Get a license. So two things, either not use the mark or getting a license. Perfect. Now let's think about the market and how the market used to behave and consumer expectations. What would be the likely outcome if toy manufacturers stopped using the mark, the logo? Yes?
People wouldn't buy the products.
People would stop buying the products or would go to the products which were licensed, right? So essentially, and this is what we see the European Commission also arguing in the opinion, is that Adam Opel was attempting to clean up the independent toy product market, essentially, toy replica market. Because should the outcome be the one of absolute protection, only something similar to Arsenal, that would mean that essentially anyone's willing to actually be on this market would need to get a license from Opel. Whereas Opel was not particularly known for this, for selling this kind of products because they were known for selling cars. Now, going back to the doctrinal aspects, which is another point, because there were two registrations, see different arguments. One, it's not likelihood of confusion when you think about the motor vehicles mark, because motor vehicles or cars and toys are not similar products. So there is a dilution claim, because dilution also covers dissimilar products, in that they were arguing that Altec, the defendant, was taking an unfair advantage by using the logo in Thai. So they were relying on Auto's brand image in relation to cars when doing this. It wasn't double identity because, again, obviously the products are not identical. One was cars / motor vehicles, the other one is toys. However, they did have a registration for toys, which is what makes the discussion relevant, because then again, identical products are listed on paper because they do have to register for toys, and the defendant was manufacturing just that, toys. Hence the question of absolute protections. If we stop there and ask nothing else, we pretty much eliminate the entire toy manufacturing industry, which has been doing that thing for more than 100 years. Whereas if we go with something arsenal-like, meaning it depends on the functions of the trademark being harmed, then we have another layer, then we get to ask another question. And what was the outcome in Opel? Was there harm to the functions, especially to the R&D function? Yes?
I would say no.
No, why is that? Yeah.
They did surveys and it showed that the vast majority of people could see from the packaging and from the product itself that it was aortic and not issue.
Very good. So there is a very fascinating, when it comes to trademark functions, empirical aspect, because the questions that we get to ask, we then start looking into the market. We move away from the paper-based assessment that normally take places within trademark law. Are you guys taking trademark and brands, and you guys will take IP and or take an IP and market? You probably will realize that the assessment made usually by, say, registration offices or trademark offices is usually paper-based. They see something on paper, they compare it with something else on paper, and then make a decision. Whereas when we have something like a functions-based assessment, you start looking into more into market conditions, and you ask more questions. And yes, absolutely right. There were surveys saying not only that there was evidence suggesting that the consumers relied on matter other than just the logo when making decisions, such as the packaging or the leaflets and Altec's own brand, but also, and this is also important, that consumers didn't really think that the products came or were associated with a Opel. They think of the car, because obviously that was the point, and which would be relevant for a dilution claim. But as far as the use of the mark in relation to toys, they just thought that it was a feature, an expected feature of toys, because they have been doing this for 100 years. Okay so far? I know this can be fairly confusing and complex.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
If Opel hadn't registered the trademark for toys,
Yeah.
would it be any difference, any huge difference? I mean,
In what sense?
if the replica manufacturer he would be in a stronger position, but I mean, was it so essential that the trademark was registered for toys as well?
Oh yeah, that's the whole point, isn't it? But if you think about the dilution claim, because when you guys, I just put the double identity sections on your reading list, but if you guys read the entire case, the other claim was dilution based on unfair advantage. And if you read that, you see that it's a fairly weak claim as well, because for the same reasons, because there is a link, but this is just but one question. There is a link, of course. When you see the replicas, you think of the vehicles, the cars, but also, is there an unfair advantage when actually people have been doing this as a practice for 100 years? And Opel itself is not really known for this kind of market. So this is, they ask the same question in a way. And they thought at the time, because of Arsenal, and just remember that is a few years just after Arsenal, that actually is a fairly controversial case, but did find that Mr. Reed was infringing by setting an official merchandise. They thought, oh, we do have a chance under double identity because then we can go with the whole arsenal / absolute protection thingy, and it is a far better case from a lawyer's perspective than just claiming dilution, which is a fairly weak case. So this is essentially the point what the ECJ did and what the BGH, when the case came back to Germany, did as well, which is saying, well, they do think of Opel, but they do think of Opel for cars, not Opel for toys. So you're asking the wrong question here, mate. And this is how it. And this is one limiting aspect of an Opel. So this is the point, essentially, that the BGH made when the case came back to Germany. Meaning that for you to have a claim that the origin function is being harmed, this should be able to show me that by seeing the logo in toy replicas, in the defendant's toy replicas, they would think that these toy replicas came from or were licensed by you, whereas market practice, which have been developed over decades, would tell otherwise, because these are not the expectations that consumers have. So one would say a very important lesson that may come from this, which is something that is also related to what we have been discussing in the first part of the seminar, is that not always what you assume as being consumer expectations are actually true. Because sometimes you think that a brand may convey one message, or that consumers will behave in one way, whereas when you start looking into the market, when you start assessing market conditions, your answer may actually be quite different. And this is also very relevant when it comes to the more controversial aspect, which is other functions. And now we get into lookalikes. So this is still the most controversial aspect of the functions theory and other trademark function, which is these extensions. So people were relatively happy with trademark functions when we had Adenoco, but then we had something like L'Oreal, and then people started to freak out again. So what was the issue here in L'Oreal Blue? And why is this case so relevant? So let's begin by thinking, what were the products or the practices at issue here? Yes?
Velour made perfumes which were in their skin identical to the expensive one from L'Oreal.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they advertised them to the retailers, they had lists that said this is the equivalent of this other one.
Perfect. So they were copycats or replicas or dupes. Depends on how you actually feel, how passionate you feel about it, I suppose. But let's stick with copycats, I suppose, or replicas. Yes, they smell, if not identical, something remarkably close that someone would probably not be able to tell apart, just by the sheer scent. And yes, so, and they start selling these with comparison lists. So the key issue here is also comparison lists. Because the way that they were able to market these was just by giving comparison lists and saying, so my product X is equivalent or the same as or close to Chanel number 5, say, and so forth. Do you guys remember what was the average price of these products? Of the copycats? Give or take, ballpark number? Don't be afraid of getting wrong. Take a guess, this child number. So how much would you guys think this kind of product would sell at? A copycat of Chanel number 5, say. 5 pounds, 7 pounds. So that was the actual price. So let's think about traditional causes, typical causes of action, do you think, even if the products look similar, do you think that consumer, it is the same market actually? Is this company competing with L'Oreal? Or with Dior, or with these others? Yes or no? You seem to be thinking yes.
Yeah, I guess because they're like the same stores, then probably like the same area. And if someone would ask at the store, like I want to buy a scent that's maybe like floral, sweet, they would be like, okay, we got that Chanel scent, and we have also like the Velour one. So
You do have a fair point in saying there may be overlapping depending on the kind of store. They may be the same stores, but do you think they would be a Harrods or like a Levi Lafayette or these kind of stores? No. And do you think that without telling anyone, someone would actually, by telling other people, someone buying Chanel products would actually go for these other ones, which cost £7? It's unlikely, right? So the National Court was making a point which the ACJ didn't take issue, that actually they were not competing with one another because the price difference was so high. Because I think, don't quote me, but I suppose the actual Chanel or equivalent would, or the real thing, let's put it this way, would be selling at £80 plus. So it's tenfold the price. So the point being made by the National Court was essentially, no, they're not really competing. Consumers are not stupid, they know what they're getting. They're just offering substitutes, probably reaching a very different section of the population. Meaning people who cannot really afford Chanel, or who really would not buy Chanel anyways because they think they're too expensive or they just don't care. So that was one of the points we made. There is no actual, or it's unlikely there's going to be some actual competition, but there is the whole comparison list thing. So do we take issue with the comparison list? What is the problem here from a trademark law perspective and from what you guys have seen here? So what is the cause of action here potentially? Let me help you. So in order to sell, to market their products, is saying that my product X is equivalent to Chanel 5. So what is happening here? Yeah.
So unfair advantage.
Unfair advantage, yeah, that was the second half of the judgment in the case. And L'Oreal won because of the ECJ, someone would say. What about the other? Any other cause of action? And why the case is on your reading list, essentially?
Double identity.
Double identity, exactly. Because you're reproducing Chanel number 5, referring to perfumes. So same thing here. If we think that in terms of absolute protection, that would mean that essentially no one would be able to do any comparison lists. However, here, and this is something new, arguably new, the ECJ is introducing, is that maybe they don't feel too comfortable about someone using someone else's mark to sell cheap replicas. So they introduced the notion of other functions. If you guys go back, so there is something more than just the origin function, which is this ability of a mark to distinguish one product from the other. And this is run from here in Arsenal, when you guys see at this last bit here, liable to affect these functions of a trademark. Meaning, oh, I have always said that there could be more than one, because I'm also using in particular the origin function. So up to that point, it was only clear that there was an origin function, but not others. And here we see this new language being introduced by saying that but these functions include not only the origin function, but also other functions in particular, meaning there could be even more quality, communication, investment, and advertising. So, what are these other functions? If we were to take a guess, and if we think about brands, in the first part of the seminar, what could be communication, advertising, and investment functions, and why should these be protected? So let's think Amazon. What does Amazon bring to mind when you think about it? Of course, Amazon is a company from Japan. So it's a website where I get stuff from. But beyond this origin, this is the origin aspect. Beyond it,
A vast range of products and a fast and reliable service.
okay, wide offer of products, availability. I can get many stuff, a lot of stuff from there. Yes.
E-commerce.
E-commerce. Yes. What else?
Kind of safety.
Safety.
Buying, yeah, because they're giving you a guarantee for their products.
Okay.
And there are products that are recommended by Amazon. So if you have a product and you want to sell it via Amazon, and Amazon is going to provide it to his clients, and Amazon thinks it is a good product, it does the advertising for you as well. So there's, if I see a product with recommended by Amazon, that's like a
Your go-to.
Yeah.
So let's frame this not only safety but reliability.
Both, yeah.
Endorsement. So yeah, fair enough. It is a reliable platform. I have not only warranty, I have also good return policies, arguably, and suggestions of products which may better suit my needs. So let's say reliable. Anything else? Yeah.
Questionable labor.
Good. Questionable labor policy. Someone would say also taxation. But labor and taxation practices. Which may already tells us something. Okay, so now let's just move to Apple. So what do you guys think of Apple? In addition to being the company from Cupertino where we all get, most of us get our laptops and smartphones from. So what does the brand Apple tell you about the product as well? Yeah.
Innovation.
Innovation. Yeah.
Design.
Design. That's very true.
Expensive.
Also true. Okay, let's hold this for now. Okay, here is Amazon. Not the best handwriting, sorry. Apple.
Kind of lifestyle.
Lifestyle. What about Harley Davidson?
Lifestyle.
Fair.
Freedom.
Great, I like this kind of approach. Yes, it's the right approach actually. What else? Just values.
Quality.
I suppose pretty much any main brand will have that. Yes.
You like tradition?
Tradition. It's been around for quite a while. Anything else that you can expect from a Harley Davidson product? Or from people using Harley Davidson? Just an exercise. No need to be. Okay, let's just finally, just for the sake of the argument, move to Coca-Cola.
Santa.
Santa, yeah. Anything else? So the only thing that Coca reminds us of is Christmas.
Gathering.
Gathering. What else?
Sharing.
Sharing. Sweet.
Yeah.
Maybe. which today maybe in these days may be an issue. Okay, so we can work with this. So we are talking about this dimension, which is beyond key origin / distinctive functions of marks and things that comes to mind. And this is what we call brand image, right? You probably heard this before. There's a brand image, which is essentially what a brand tells us and what does it convey to us in terms of meaning, in terms of message, and even information, right? And these go far beyond function. Sometimes they do convey values. Sometimes brands start being used for something different, or maybe moving away from just being a product from a company. Harley Davidson being part of a community of bikers who just gather together, or Coca-Cola being associated with Christmas. So this is all the brand image aspect of it. So if we think about other functions, we're talking about communication, advertising, and investment function. So how could, before we see the ECJ's approach, how could we try to fit this here? So how does, and this is the very beginning of our class today, how does one build a brand image or reputation? Is true? Yeah.
Advertisement of value, I would say.
Advertising, yes. So it is pretty evident that here advertising has something to do with this. Is Coca-Cola, Apple as brands worth something? Quite a bit. And why is that? So in order for someone to build a brand as being arguably associated with, I would say, innovation, design, and lifestyle, what does it take in addition to advertising? So if I just advertise for a week, is that going to be enough?
Say maybe monopoly in the market, or dominating in the market.
Good point. You may result from a monopoly. If you do have a monopoly from, say, a patent, you may actually get this over time. But the point here is also over time. There is some investment, there is some time, expensiveness. So the idea is, at least the theoretical idea is that there is investment through advertising which generates this kind of brand-related aspect of trademarks. And what we seem to be moving to is that these are also, to some extent, protected under trademark law. And this is Dev Genji's point when he's writing about L'Oreal, when he say that EU trademark law is arguably one of the first legal regimes to actually embrace brands and actually provide legal means to somehow protect brands. The question is, to what extent are we actually ready to do this? And of course, actually getting it right. And let me just show you, before I get to the other function, let me just provoke you by using the Amazon example. So Amazon, reliable and some kind of endorsement and so forth. That is the view of one of you, whereas the other may have the view that, well, questionable labor and taxation practices. What if someone actually buys a product which is suggested by Amazon and has a really terrible experience? Would that person share the same view of this? Probably not, right? So there's a point to be made here as well, because and this is also a point that Dev makes, which is one thing is brand image, and the other thing is brand identity, which has much to do with the other noble point as well. And one is not necessarily the same as the other. And this is because how brands are actually work and how meaning is constructed in practice. Brand identity is essentially the market advertising planning from the brand owner. So what the values or attributes that Apple or Amazon or Harley Davidson want to convey to consumers as being their brand. It is their very own notional paper approach to brands. And I would say that, maybe except for this last one on Amazon, we are pretty much spot on saying that, oh, this is probably what they wanted, so to some or a large extent. Whereas brand image, on the other hand, is how, if at all, consumers receive this message and read, construe, or even adapt or change it. Meaning, just to say that not necessarily everything that that the brand owner believes his mark or her mark to be is actually true in practice. Our simple, very simple example still under the origin functions is item logo. They're saying, well, anyone buying the product, we actually think that this product came from me or were licensed from me, by me. Whereas by looking into the market, you realize that consumers actually had no idea, paid no attention to this whatsoever. So there is this kind of disconnect. The practical aspect of this is just essentially about how you then assess that these functions are being harmed or infringed. Because if you do take this more theoretical paper-based approach, you might make more assumptions that may not necessarily be supported by reality. And the result is that it is going to be infringing when in fact the impact that the practice itself may have may be more theoretical than real. It's on your further in the list, that's why I spent more time. Just a point, it's a very good article. Dev will actually be here giving the last public lecture in March. It's a little bit far away, but I would definitely recommend that you guys attend it. Especially if anything, because he's a great speaker as well. So what we have here, and I'll try to fit this within our framework, is what the ECJ has somewhat defined as the other functions, at least the functions that we know of. And then we have quality function. And again, going back to the very beginning of this class, quality function. So what do you normally expect of a product in terms of quality? So this means essentially, one would say that it allows the trademark owner to exercise some kind of control over the way that the product is being marketed. So main example is when products are actually adulterated and sold and resold in the marketplace. So trademark owner may oppose some of these adulterations by arguing that it is harming the quality function. One very good example is pharmaceutical drugs being repackaged. So companies willing to sell in the UK generic medicaments, or even patented ones, may source those medicaments from, say, Greece, where they are actually a lot cheaper, and resell them here in the UK. But in order to do that, to comply with regulation and consumer law, not trademark law, they need to provide some very specific information in English, which would entail things such as affixing a label, which may be or may not be obscuring the original information on the packaging, or even sometimes repackaging the whole thing entirely. So it is an adulteration of the product, and it may or may not affect the quality function. So here I gave you one example of the ECJ. It's an early case, not so early actually, 2004, where the ECJ is addressing when or how there would be harm to the quality function when it comes to repackaging pharmaceutical drugs. Because you know, there is no confusion, you know that it comes actually from Pfizer, hopefully. Other cases when you try to protect the aura of a luxury of a mark, say products being resold outlets without the authorization from the trademark holder. Advertising function, use which adversely affects the proprietor's use as a factor in sales promotion or as an instrument of commercial strategy. So those things which lead to the construction of a brand image, some of these acts may be enjoined or restrained under the advertising function. And you guys have at least 2 examples on your reading list. One is Volkswagen from the VGH, and the other one is, which is on the further reading list, Cosmetic Warriors, which is the Lush case from the UK, where both were found infringing the advertising function. And finally, the investment function, which is very dilution-like as well. So interfering with the reputation or affecting the reputation of a brand or a trademark. So in practice, many of the things that we see happening under dilution have been transported back to double identity via other functions. So mostly tarnishment, investment function, offer advantage, advertising function, and obviously blurring, quality/origin function. Just so we can wrap up, it's a long time. 2 relevant cases that happen later, and are also on your further reading list. Google France and Interflora, where we see them attempting to define these other functions, as you see here, and also to qualify those other functions as in a further attempt to restrain them by saying that, well, it's not every act which will be harming other functions. Do you guys have any questions? I think that's it for today then. Next week we move to geographical indications and then to your presentation the other week. You guys probably noticed that I have